Colleagues, welcome back to the office and welcome to our presentation for today. This is Driving Change in Audit, Digital and Data Technology. My name is Steve Yass. I'll be your instructor and presenter today, and I am joined by a very special guest. And we will be discussing the Inflo software solution for audit coverage. I'm joined today by Mark Edmondsom, the CEO and principal of that solution. Mark, why don't you go ahead and say hello and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve. Great to meet everyone. My name is Mark Edmondsom, founder and CEO of Inflo. I have a background in the accounting profession. I've worked in small firms. I've worked in some of the biggest firms as well, the Big Four, really trying to drive the leveraging and use of technology to support core services such as audit. And we're really trying to elevate the efficiency as well as the value that these services can deliver to clients, Steve.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day or busy night. Mark is joining us from the pond to come and talk to us a little bit about Inflo and the different products and services that you offer. In today's presentation, we're going to go ahead and take a look at this solution in the context of kind of understanding audit and assurance services in a global workplace, and trying to understand essentially some of the main issues and risks and benefits that today's auditors face, and potentially how Inflo can help us solve some of these concerns. I can talk a little bit about digital audit, kind of modern day practices with respect to management of today's techniques and practices for audits. Talking about how data can significantly improve, a auditor's ability to be able to gain insight on firm operations and client operations and more. It really feels that and today we've got just this sea of data. There's so much you could look at, and so many different ways that you could look at and you could use for your audit. How do you kind of separate the signal from the noise, and how Inflo can assist with that? And really kind of exploring, I think, some different ways that this product and this company can assist today's auditor with the issues that they face. Now, just as a reminder for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is part of our CPE Today podcast series. CPE Today, we bring you a podcast twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, at least most weeks, live at 11 a.m. Pacific, available on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you happen to find your content. And in our podcast, we explore the latest and greatest at the avenues of accounting and technology, really kind of helping to give you the knowledge and insight to make you the best and most successful practitioner that you possibly can. Now, if you are a first-time listener to the CPE podcast, you can earn a free CPE credit with us. After watching or listening, head on over to cpetoday.com and you can earn a free credit for today's course by using one free podcast at checkout. In addition, I will point out today's podcast is available for free credit for all listeners if you just visit our website and check out Inflo software. No obligation to you, but a great way to earn some credits to stay on top of your continuing education. Now, for those of you who are attending live with us here, please note that there will be attendance and polling questions. We're going to go ahead and put up one now just so you can see what it looks and feels like. Please respond to those. And as long as you respond to all podcast questions, you will receive full credits for today's class. Your CPE certificate will be sent to you automatically within 2 business days, but it'll most likely come a little bit later today. If you have any issues, you can certainly reach out to us with any questions you might have. And I'm going to encourage you, as we are talking throughout our conversation today between Mark and myself, if you have any questions, please go ahead and reach out and let us know what they are. We've got the myth, the man, the legend with us here for Inflo, and you can answer, he will be able to answer any questions you might have regarding his product, company, and offering. And if you have any technical issues, again, also please feel free to reach out. All righty, without further ado, Mark, let's go ahead and get into it. And let's just start, maybe first with just kind of understanding kind of the genesis of Inflo. I know your background, you started in small business accounting, but a bulk of your career was really kind of spent at PricewaterhouseCoopers, working in their assurance teams as an hunter itself. Maybe you can share a little bit with us kind of your background with respect to PwC and, kind of the work led up to creating Inflo.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So my first exposure to the accounting profession, the very start of my career in a small accounting firm, was that very old school bookkeeping service where my clients were giving me those bags of invoices that we've all probably experienced at
Oh
those
yeah.
very early stages. And, there wasn't just invoices in that bag, there was all sorts of other stuff in there as well, shall we say. And really kind of that entry level immersion to how manual creating books and records was in
Oh
those
man.
days. We're probably going back about 15 years or so, probably closer to 20 years, maybe, if I'm being honest. And that was that first impression of a profession that was so important to the clients that they were working with, but yet behind the scenes was incredibly manual in terms of how
Yeah.
things were actually performed. And that was a really interesting exposure that set me up for going to university, going to college in the equivalent terminology, and setting off on a career path towards, should we say, the other end of the spectrum, going into a big four firm, their audit and assurance practice, and starting to get under the skin of how big corporate businesses and accounting and auditing worked in that particular area. And while there's obviously some massive differences, there's also inherently some incredible similarities between, yes, there's the bigger scale, but there's still behind the scenes an incredible amount of manual effort that goes
Oh yeah.
into a big four audit. In my time, we would be doing a huge amount of work that was incredibly complex. It was still ultimately being done in spreadsheets and in Word documents, and a very kind of heavy and labor intensive way of performing what was a really critical service. And I was really at the forefront in PwC of starting to think about how we could maybe use data more during the process and how we could use technology more across the process. And naturally, those two things go hand in hand, because if you start to look at data, you start to move away from the traditional way of sampling certain things or wading through and trying to find pieces of paper. And you start to look at ways you could maybe automatically perform those kind of checks and balances across the entire population, which requires you to have better technology, which requires you to think about how the client is accounting for their organization, but how you can start to tap into their technology, how you can really mine their data. And being at the forefront of that in a big four firm, we had a huge amount of resources to start thinking through the art of the possible. What could we possibly do to transform a service that was very traditional and being performed in a very traditional way to something that actually was far more efficient, better quality, and was delivering far more value, so we could create a competitive advantage. And we learned a heck of a lot of lessons. Myself and my co-founder Inflo, we were both working together at PwC, learning an incredible amount as we were going through those first iterations of a profession and a sector that was really trying to be honest, Steve, use technologies that weren't really designed for the purposes that we were trying to use them for, and really try and start to crunch bigger data sets. And that led us to a career at PwC driving innovation across their audit technology, their audit methodologies, the way that they trained, the way that they implemented technology. And then 7 years ago, we founded Inflo to be able to take all of that knowledge and experience and recognize that the problems we were trying to solve for that one firm were profession-wide. Every accounting firm of all shapes and sizes was trying to use technology more in the process, was struggling with the cost of technology to be able to build it themselves, and was really trying to utilize more automation and more data across the process. And that is basically the genesis behind Inflo, to try and take those profession-wide challenges that we're experiencing, things like capacity, things like the relevance of the work that we're doing, and try to harness those into a technology solution that every accounting firm can access.
Yeah, I mean, so much of what you're saying resonates with me from my background. Working in accounting for as many years as I had, and I always like to say I'm a recovering accountant at this point. Working mostly in technology, but so much of what I learned in accounting is still so relevant, and I apply to my day-to-day operations. But I would say that especially in small business, but really from at all levels of business, there's two things inside of running a company. There's whatever you're there to do. If it's a restaurant, it's cooking delicious food. If it's a medical office, it's providing care to your patients. But then there's the business of the business, the accounting, the insurance, the legal side of this that tends to get overlooked by especially small business clients. And I've had those clients in the past, that would just bring you a big basket full of stuff and be like, all right, here you go. Here's everything you love to work with, good luck making the tax return. It's like, I don't know if you had the same in the UK, but they'd include like an August statement from their bank. And it's like, well, thank you. This means nothing to me. I need the year-end statement, and that separation between, like, this isn't something you just do once a year. It's something you do continuously. It's a normal course of business for everybody. I think is I was shocked, even with large businesses. It's like they forget that like, no, accounting needs to be done every single period, for lots of reasons, whether it be your bank covenants, legal requirements for public disclosure, or just to know where you are. And when leveraged correctly, accounting can be such a great competitive advantage because it gives you the insight to make decisions. And the other thing that you mentioned that I also resonates with me is this idea of cost and performance. That we have so much data. What do we actually focus in on? Well, from my perspective, the ultimate purpose of accounting is decision usefulness. We're here to help people make decisions, and it's that signal through the noise to be able to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff, and to kind of get the bulk. And when you're an auditor, I mean, I often am in awe of like some of these big companies. Where do you begin to audit a company like British Airways or Ford or Coca-Cola that have global operations? Like, there's so much data. How do you make sense of like what's actually relevant for what you want to focus on? And it's not just a big company like PwC need. It's a need for everybody, because even at the small scale, it's unrealistic to think you can audit 100,000 transactions with a team of 3 or 4 people, and even if you could, the cost would be astronomical, for being able to provide that level of assurance to ultimately help people make decisions, in this case, the public. So I think what you're building here is definitely something I think is useful for well outside of Big Four. And I think on behalf of everybody, I appreciate you bringing it to market for the rest of us. So what's been your favorite part of this in terms of this journey, in terms of creating Inflo?
I think the favorite piece, it's probably been the community that we've been creating around this, Steve. And I think that's what's been interesting, has been that's not just about accountants within CPA firms and in practice. We've seen a real strong connection with accountants who are sat the other side of the table now in the finance function, craving something from their advisors that is more insightful, that is more in tune with the modern way that businesses operate. I think what's been really interesting is we've seen that shift where in certain places, clients have been seeking out accounting firms who are using our technology. They've been actively going and saying, I've heard that there's a new way that the audit can be performed. I like the sound of that. I want to find an advisory firm who's leveraging this technology. And I think that's a really interesting concept, where you start to move from some of these, what would traditionally be seen as very kind of core back-end applications of, you need a system that's going to be able to document your work and meet your compliance needs, to actually these kind of technologies are now front of house. These are the kind of things that you would be leading in a sales presentation with, to say, we've got a competitive advantage in the way that we can work with you and the way the kind of outputs that you're going to get. The audit is no longer going to be a signed piece of paper at the end and we'll see you next year. It's going to be an insightful experience, and hopefully you're going to want to continue that all year round with us. And that starts to get you into more of the CFO type or CAS type space, where you're kind of saying, well, actually, can core compliance services like audits not be delivered all year round in a more valuable way?
Yeah, absolutely. I it's something that I would say kind of resonates. You have invasive surgery and you have non-invasive surgery. Would you go to a doctor that's going to cut you open, or would you do it laparoscopically now, where, whether it be risk of infection or quick recovery time, I mean, it's a no-brainer to me, and there's physicians, that's their competitive thing. It's like, hey, we could do the same surgery and it's going to maybe even cost a little less, and you're going to feel a lot better a lot quicker, and this feels like that inflow from the financials perspective can be that. Whether it be for the auditor, increasing their ability to do audits faster and quicker and more affordable, or the client where, hey, we don't have to turn the company inside out, for 2 weeks while the auditors are here and disrupt all of our major business operations.
Yeah, really smooth in that piece. And that's where when we start to think about the digital audit, we're starting to unpack that as being much bigger than just simply plug a new piece of technology in and it does something slightly differently. It's around, to your point there, Steve, around the client experience, but it's how do we collaborate with the client? It's how are we creating a better experience for them, for our teams as well. We've got to make the profession attractive to be able to retain talent within the CPA market. And it's those components that when you start to unpack this, it's not just about taking the exact same process that we're currently performing and moving into the cloud, which is what you'll hear a lot of other kind of technology vendors talking about. Oh, well, we're just going to move to the cloud. And it all sounds really easy. It's really about actually thinking about that more holistically. This is an opportunity to think a bit differently around how we do this. Sure, we help some firms do exactly the same thing they currently do in the cloud compared to in the desktop. That's fine if that's the approach that they want to take. But there's an opportunity there to think about how we're actually performing this work. How do we use data? How are we training our teams? What does the workflow look like from the start to finish? And that's what we're talking about when we're thinking about this digital audit concept.
Yeah, that resonates with me too. I mean, moving to AWS isn't just like taking your in-house Amazon or your in-house Windows server and just replicating it up in the cloud. I mean, the phrase I like is a thoughtful reconsideration of what your workplace could be and should be, and if you're following those same practices in 2022 that you were doing in 2015, I mean, not only are you not competitive anymore, you're missing the boat. You're paying too much, you're taking too much time. It's just not as effective or as efficient as you possibly can make it. So why don't you go ahead and explain for me from your perspective, when you hear the words digital audit, if I were sitting in a seminar and the presenter was talking through this, what would that mean in the context of Inflo, and what does that mean to you as the auditor in the audience?
Is that for me, Steve, or is that a polling question that you're firing?
No, I'm asking you. Yeah,
I know there's important CPE considerations here, so I don't want to give.
Oh, you'll know when they're coming. You'll know when they're coming. We'll do it here just in a minute. Yeah.
From my experience, so there's two key components to this. One is the digital experience. So we're moving the way that we work with between client and audit firm, CPA firm, to be less about manual exchange of information and time spent in person, and be more a digital experience. So i.e. we're using laptops, iPads, devices to interact and collaborate remotely, flexibly, anytime, anywhere. So it's moving from the more analog process that you would explain of, the audit used to be you turn up on day one on site and you get the ring bind folder and you work your way through it, to it's much more about how do we use exchange information remotely, that more portal collaboration, etc. The other key piece is then data. So how can we start to use data expansively across that process? So how can we really target automation, use data to be able to do what we would have done manually automatically? And how can we use data to then actually start elevating what the service actually represents? So it's a two-level play. One is automate what is already being done. Second bit is then think about new ways that we could use data to perform something comparable, but that's more valuable in overall totality. So that's things like, for example, extracting the data from the client accounting system, performing your work using data analytical techniques to look for fraud indicators, to analyze the revenue streams, to visualize the performance of the business and its margins, and then to be able to put some of that onto the audit file to meet the compliance rules, but then pass more of that back to the client to be able to benchmark their data versus other businesses that you've seen and experienced, or give them insights which are more around, did you know that these transactions were being booked in the wrong way, or that these processes could be improved? So that's kind of giving you that kind of more holistic view on this, Steve. It's around the digital
Sure.
way of working and a data-driven approach.
Okay, so I'm assuming then it's fair to say that Inflo is basically the collection of these different techniques in a kind of standardized pipeline environment from end to end, from the beginning of the engagement to delivery of the audit report to the audit, board and the board of directors.
That's exactly it, Steve. It's broken down into it's a flexible approach where firms can take either individual products or an integrated suite of products. So we've got that flexibility to either work around what a firm is heavily committed to as a technology stack, or to look at re-platforming a number of those applications that are in their business. We're focused on some key areas, being the way that we collaborate with the clients and we collect the PBC, prepared by client information. So that's our collaboration capability. We've then got a data analytics product suite that allows us to extract the data from any accounting system that a client is using and provide a suite of consistent analytical techniques for the auditor to use to perform very common audit tests and to start producing more valuable outputs. We've then got the working papers capability, which has housed within it our own proprietary audit methodology. So your typical kind of checklists that you would be using from a PPC perspective, or something like a knowledge coach, the more kind of prevalent tools there, checkpoint tools, etc. We've got our own methodology that we've built from the ground up that is a data-driven approach to the audit. So it's got embedded into it the automation opportunities that we know are present when you have data. So firms can replace their legacy kind of trial balance and working papers documentations tool with this specific product, or with the combination of products. And then we've got a quality management capability as well, which responds to some of the new standards that have recently been approved in the US. There's a 3-year window for firms to implement this, but that's around really implementing a system of risk management and quality management, Steve, across the firm, which you can obviously naturally start to see the synergy between something that's monitoring the quality of the work being within the platform that's executing the work.
Sure, absolutely. And, I think this is a pretty good segue to talk through our next bit here, which is really kind of discussing kind of the evolution of audit and, kind of the movement towards digitalization. But let me start by saying, like, in today's environment, to me anyways, both as a as a practitioner, as a license holder, as well as a software developer, with really good comprehensive knowledge on data systems, and then also the accounting side and the procedures and practices that go in there, it really feels like today with audit, it's all about systems in general. That the actual transactions themselves aren't as relevant as the internal controls and the procedures that are put in place to manage these systems. And I haven't physically done an audit myself, although I've participated in audits recently, and many years at this point. But it just feels like I need to make certain assertions about the reliability of the systems themselves. Are they susceptible to fraud? Are they susceptible to misuse or mismanagement? That could otherwise cause me to make a wrong statement on the actual financial statements. It just seems like so much of today it's about the actual underlying systems themselves. And accountants, if they don't view themselves as being technology people, I feel like they're really missing the boat, because that's 99% of what we're doing now. It's not like the old days of lots of paper. I mean, it's all about movement of data from the origination, whether it be with the customer or the vendor, to the financial statement. And you're here to really kind of look at these systems to ensure that the information coming out of them are reliable.
Yeah, I think that's on one level, Steve, very, very much kind of the direction of travel. The challenge for auditors in CPA firms is that not necessarily the world that they're living in is keeping pace with that vision that you share there, in terms of, well, it would be great if we could perform an audit by simply saying, well, the system's all set up and configured correctly, so everything must be fine. Like, let's move on. That's just simply not the real world, both in terms of what the audit standards and the regulators require to be done. And being candid, there's not many clients in my experience that had those kind of systems. Even when, you know, I was focused on much more the SME space at PwC, not auditing the banks and the listed companies, more the kind of, you know, let's say 20 to 30 to 50 million dollar turnover businesses. That kind of business just doesn't have the inbuilt systems that you could completely rely upon. They either don't know what the systems are doing, or they do and they don't do it very well. And so the standards and the clients are really requiring that, yes, we can probably take a little bit more of a controls-based approach and rely on the systems a little bit more now than we used to be able to do. And certainly new changes in standards are pointing towards greater understanding of systems and technology and using automated tools and techniques to be able to perform the audit. But sadly, there's still an inherent need for very old school collection of evidence. We need to have a list of transactions that we've tested to be able to prove that, yes, the system looks good, but hell, we've still got to have looked and ticked 30 to 60 invoices or whatever. So I think it's where you then go, okay, well, we can probably directly start to rely on the system more. And that's where the data comes in, because now maybe we can use the data to verify that what we've been told the system's supposed to do, or the process that we're supposed to go from, you know, order to cash, actually is evidenced through the transactions that are flowing through the system. So I think it's about a combination of using those things, Steve, but I know there'll be many practitioners on there that'll be, are we wishing that we could just simply look at the IT systems and be comfortable with that approach?
I know. There's certainly advances in AI and big data, but I mean, it's still very much a human element here. I mean, it's what you got between your ears, and you know, there's still simple audit techniques that are so very, very useful, like not, you know, surprise audits, you know, for example, showing up and not telling the client what inventory you're going to count and picking it when you show up. That could be really helpful in determining whether or not, you know, there's fraud evident in the company. So, but why don't we go ahead? Let's have our first review question here, and I'll go ahead and read it out here, read the options, and you can go ahead and give me your perspective here and tell me what you think the correct answer is. So our question here is, what firm challenges stem from using dated methodologies? Is it manually filing in audit forms, desktop applications make remote work difficult, poor user interfaces, auditing software unnatural for digital natives, or all of the above? From my perspective, I think it'd be all of the above. I think there is benefit of all of this, you know, in terms of challenges. The manual efforts of any of this is really kind of difficult, right? And Inflo is a completely browser-based technology, right? There's no
correct, yeah, completely browser-based, which eliminates a lot of those challenges around desktop synchronization of files. I mean, I've heard some of the horror stories of trying to move copies around and replication and sync errors, and really just, you know, the last couple of years have really exposed desktop technologies for some of the ways that they really struggle when you've got a remote workforce. I know a lot of CPA firms are trying to be very creative around talent and how they're working, and so desktop solutions are really difficult when you're not all sat in a similar place next to each other. And so we've seen a real trend on the adoption of cloud as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would tell you, so much of good software comes from understanding how people are going to leverage and use it. I mean, there's so many applications. Did you ever hear about that story? I think it was one of the major banks here in the US, might have been Citibank actually, where a trader accidentally caused the bank like $100 million, basically shorted a stock for like $100 million and cost the bank that, because the user interface was poorly designed. They misunderstood like basically what they were supposed to do and put the trade in the wrong. But that was a story that came up a couple of years ago. I'm probably misrepresenting, you know, the corpus of it. But the point is, like, you have to know how people are going to use your application and then build to support that workflow.
Yeah, and actually monitoring it is quite insightful as well, Steve. Even when you think you know how users are using the platform and you think it's designed in the right way, there's a lot of analytical techniques that can reveal that as well nowadays.
Yep. Yep. Why don't we pivot and talk a little bit more about Inflo with respect to the technology behind it? If you could, kind of help me understand the environment in which you operate in, both from a technical level, let's say the actual technology itself, and then just kind of bigger picture with respect to some of the inputs and outputs that you can expect to get when leveraging Inflo.
Yeah, absolutely. So we leverage Microsoft Azure's cloud
Sure.
environment. There's firms in the US that is both housed and backed up in the US environment, so the data never leaves the shore in essence. And that's really important to make sure that we've got the kind of confidentiality, data protection, and security right, because what we're talking about handling here is highly confidential data that really is a risk for firms. And so we often get a lot of questions, Steve, from firms who are new to this, and they're asking about, well, how can I be confident that your system's more secure and like a really good way of handling this? And often we find that the firms are still using email quite heavily to exchange confidential information, which is really susceptible to hacking and kind of penetration. And this is an opportunity to actually bring together, rather than this data, which is all shapes and sizes, being scattered across email accounts and being scattered across kind of SharePoint sites and all this kind of stuff, actually keeping it in one place where we've got a single version of the truth. And it's bringing the client and the CPA firm together into that space. So it's focusing on, first and foremost, the exchange of files and information for the collaboration. Now, that's predominantly a very labor-intensive process to ask for the information we need and chase the client for the information we need. So it's a real efficiency opportunity to really get things organized, project managed, and make sure we've got that granularity to be able to track the individual items that we need from the client and whether they've provided them. But that's kind of a gateway to then starting to move that exchange of information from being files to data. And that's where we start to move the inputs from being just simply Word documents, Excel files, PDFs, to, okay, can we get an extract of the full data set from the accounting system? So rather than you running a bunch of different reports from here, I want a sales dump, I want a list of all
General ledger,
receivables, all this kind of stuff, right? Just give me one single file which has all of this in. And that's where we take whatever shape or format of data we can get from any accounting system and push it through if you imagine it as a big funnel, that at the bottom we get to a common data model set of data. So we've got exactly the same fields in exactly the same structure from all of these hundreds and thousands of different accounting systems. And that really gives you then the foundation for automation, because if you can get all the same fields and you can put this through a trial balance mapping process, so you've got the structure of the data nailed down in terms of what's revenue, what's costs, what's balance sheet accounts, etc., then you've now got a really rich data set to build the automation from. So that's where the process side of things really starts to kick in, because now we can start to say, okay, well, we know that one of the common audit tests we need to perform is a journal entry test to look for fraudulent or potentially fraudulent transactions. So what are the kind of characteristics we would apply? Where would the auditor need to input their own judgment and decision making? And how can we help them get from the common data model set to an output that they can put on the engagement file? So at the end of a test like that, they're producing a detailed document that they can attach wherever they need to attach to, that evidences all of that work and meets the regulatory standards that sit here. There's a lot to unpack in that data analytics space. It's a really buzz topic where it's where you start to see, okay, we could start to use machine learning and AI to start to really enrich that thought process. We can start to spin that in different ways to perform a replacement test, perform a new technique, or simply to just provide, PowerPoint presentations back to the client. That's going to be really interesting. Sure. But that's a particular area that you then start to see. It's quite hard to weave some of the real bleeding edge data analytical techniques into the old way of working. And so we've got a lot of firms who do use our data analytics next to, let's say, a CCH, an engagement tool, for example, for documenting the audit work. And so they'll be using engagement with Knowledge Coach and their methodology. And they kind of get to this point where some of the data analytic techniques we do are really easy to slot into the methodology, but some of them actually require you to take a step back and think about that process a little bit differently. So for example, do you really need to do as big a sample size if you've looked at the data and it kind of looks all right? Well, no, probably not, but those kind of methodologies don't really incorporate that thinking. And so what we extended the product into was that data-driven audit methodology, which also handles different industry sectors or industry niches, which are prevalent in the US market, to really refine the audit approach to specifically how do we best audit a automotive dealership, for example, using data. And we've housed that in a cloud work papers or working papers solution. That means that everything is housed together. So we can go end to end here, all the way through the process, producing the financial statements, everything that we need to through the trial balance capabilities to really bring it all together. It can be broken up, Steve, so you can kind of say, okay, well, I'm going to stick with that particular tool that I've already got, but I just want to put the collaboration tool in or this piece.
Sure.
And that's been really helpful for firms to manage the change management side of this over a few years. Or a lot of firms are at the point where they're very frustrated with their existing technology in this particular area, and they're quite, should we say, aggressively going, I want to change this quite holistically. And that's where we're seeing a lot of firms really take the combined approach here and bring in something that's very, very in tune with how we can transform audit services.
Absolutely. It doesn't make sense to shoehorn old legacy procedures into a modern approach. It's you're reinventing the wheel in a worse way, in a more ineffective way compared to, again, holistically thinking about like what you're trying to do and ultimately knowing the end game of like, hey, I'm looking to make a report on the reliability of the information from these systems. Well, let's use modern techniques and practices to get to that rather than just kind of go back to the way we've always done things. One of the things I've often struggled with is that rules and regulations often lag behind technology innovation. And sometimes you want to run, but the rules and regulations aren't there yet to really support that. A small example of my business, we do these podcasts, right? They're an hour long because that's the minimum amount of time that's accepted everywhere, but we can obviously do less time, which would be nano learning, like 10, 15 minutes here or there. But, until the laws and regulations allow for something like that, we're stuck having to do something that isn't reflective of, I think, modern practices in terms of where we want to go. And sometimes that struggle, because audit frameworks are still, some of those regulations are 20, 30 years old at this point, in terms of how you confirm things. And that can be really struggle. I've often struggled with that.
Well, my team will love the fact that you brought up the CPE requirements, Steve. As somebody who's from the UK and looking in at the US, I've said many times that in my opinion, we need to make really interesting content available to US CPA firms so as they can engage with it. But why does it have to be an hour long? Like, why can't we just do 20 minutes or 30 minutes of really rich content and they get half of a CPE? And I've been told many times, no, this isn't possible. And I keep saying, but it's got to be a useful way of looking at this. Because
I know.
Because we can make this an hour long and really draw it out for everybody, or we could just action-packed 20 minutes.
I completely agree.
But anyway, my team will love the fact that you brought that up, because I've asked them probably about 20 times, and every 2 months, Steve say, are you sure we can't do this anymore? But
well,
no.
I'll give you one bit that you can go back to your team with that'll make you very happy. In the United States, your major markets are like California, Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, places like that. And about half the states accept Nano and about half don't. But the largest state, California, my home state, where there are more accountants than anywhere else in the country, has an exposure draft amongst the CBA, the Board of Accountancy here, to adopt Nano, blended, and simulated learning, hopefully by the end of the year, which will allow us to do shorter. So if that's the case, then you'll have more than half of the United States that will allow for those shorter content pieces. But you Google it, you can find some information on that.
We've been doing a really, really useful and really in tune series of like 20 to 30 minute webinars, which we've got to be honest, people are really busy and fitting these things into their schedule.
Great.
But that's always been a kind of bugbear for me, is like, well, this is as good as somebody spending an hour waffling on about something that just to kind of fill the time. So is that what we need to do? But no, I think it's really interesting what you're sharing there, Steve. And I think the whole point here is we need everything that we're thinking about to be more in tune with it's not just us, right? It's people who are coming in to join a CPA firm now. I often speak to firms, and we're taking people who have been brought up with technology. It is second nature to them. All of the kind of things that
Yeah.
we now use, but like everything's on these things, right? Everything is done on these, and yet we bring them into a CPA firm, and I just wonder sometimes what the look.
Here's your fax machine.
Yeah, like here's how we
Yeah.
do a bank confirmation. You what? Like what is it you mean? We have to ring them up and chase the letter. Yeah, that's kind of how it works, right? No, it's just kind of you must kind of feel that what we need to make the profession more attractive and keep talent in is to lay out a more exciting future. And I think that there is that exciting future ahead. It's around how do we try and start to embrace the opportunities and the innovations that are available to us to really bring them in and make the most value out of people as well.
Yep. I think a lot of it, so I'd like to introduce this. This is the Rodgers Diffusion of Innovations, which really helps us understand when and how technology has been adopted. And I mean, this isn't a new concept. I mean, this has been around since the 60s. But accounting is both cutting edge in some respects and like antiquated and old in others. And it's so weird that it's not like a one or the other. It's a layered thing. It's like we're really good over here, but really slow over here. And there's so many different technologies that could be adopted, but yet lag behind for one or other reasons. And it's amazing that there are firms like I have a course on paperless technology I teach, and I'm blown away. In 2022, I still have to teach this class, about what it looks like to leverage Adobe Acrobat and PDFs for distribution of digital learning, or not learning, but accounting records for that most. And then we got stuff like QMS and data-driven methodology and open banking. Where do you see, your average client that adopts Inflo kind of being? Are they, the first quadrilateral or the end? I'm going to guess they're more of a leading edge innovator more than they are going to be a laggard. But what from your perspective, what do you think?
At this stage, we're approaching the majority of the techniques that we're using. You can see, cloud work papers, data analytics, collaboration portals. They're getting further along the adoption curve here, and this is a really interesting concept. If you've never come across it before, I'd definitely recommend a quick Google and have a look at this. But like what we're talking about in terms of core capabilities, Steve, are very much moving along the Rodgers curve here. And then you've got elements that we're using that are really starting to come in at the start. So where does a firm typically sit? Well, it depends on what products they're coming to us to use. So if they're coming because they're really excited about using open banking, then they're probably very much in that early adopters phase. But if they're coming to us saying, well, we feel like we need to move from a paper-based audit to doing something more different, like, again, that like you say, there are still firms out there that are doing it like that for many different reasons. So we see firms across the spectrum, I must admit, and it depends on, to be honest with you, where they're currently sitting rather than what they're necessarily, they have to be a certain mindset for us to work with them. Naturally, we see that firms are more towards the left-hand side when they're coming to us really enthused, really excited to implement something more progressive, more holistic across the firm. And that's where we start to get into this difference between a more transformational implementation of the software or a more incremental way of approaching the software. So I think a different way of cutting it might be to think about how much and how aggressive are firms looking at their adoption of technology. The firms towards the right-hand side of this chart, so the later majority, should we say, are trying to take it a lot slower. Let's put this bit in this year and then maybe this bit next year, and it's a 3 to 5 year plan. The firms on the left-hand side, it can't happen quickly enough. It's right, I get it, I want it, let's get it in, because as soon as I get it in, I can start thinking about the next thing rather than thinking about the thing that we're already talking about, Steve.
Disrupting, the existing workflow of what people have done. And I can't remember. There's a famous tech pioneer who said the phrase, break things early and often. I want to say it was somebody, maybe in Apple or something like that, though. But, in accounting, I mean, we tend to be brown shoes and button up shirts and, tend to be a little bit more conservative. And, frankly, I think with technology, something I normally say in a lot of my tech classes is that doesn't matter where you are in the lifespan of a company. Technology is that opportunity of hitting the reset button. That you could be super far behind, but if you come up with some new innovative approach that saves time, money, something new, compelling that people are interested in, you can jump to the front of the line almost instantly. The example I give is that when I was in high school, Apple was damn near bankrupt. Their stock was trading at under $10 a share. You fast forward almost 25 years later, they're the most valuable company in the world with a $3 trillion market cap. And that all came around, breaking the chains of legacy and kind of coming up with new innovative approaches. And with Inflo and with the correct, I would think, top down, support at the top where management thinks it's a good idea and is willing to put the resources and effort behind it. I mean, you could take it a firm and you could be that next generation firm that you're having to turn people away because you have too many clients and too many people wanted to work with you.
The growth opportunity is huge, Steve. And what's really interesting is a lot of traditionally smaller firms might have felt a competitive disadvantage because of technology, because they didn't have the deep pockets to be able to go and invest in these kind of areas. So it would feel like, well, we're going to be reliant upon whatever the incumbent providers are kind of putting into the market. And there's been a real lack of investment from vendors over the last 5 to 10 years in this particular space. But what's happened right now is with the emergence of cloud, and should we say some newer kids on the block bringing more exciting, more innovative approaches to this than the bigger oil tankers that are serving the market. We've got this ability now for smaller firms who are more agile. They're able to make decisions more quickly. The tone at the top is easier for 2 or 3 people to really get on the same page than it is for 20 office firms to be able to get their leadership together. There's a real advantage now for smaller firms to adopt these technologies and these techniques, implement them, and get into the market and talk about how they're using them. And so we're seeing firms are winning new clients because they're using this technology. They are also increasing the average fees that they're obtaining from their existing clients because they're able to take a more valuable offering, but also additional supplementary offerings to these clients, and they're willing to pay for these. Mm-hmm. And you're starting to be able to actually service a lot of that additional work because you free the capacity from the team because it's more efficient anyway. So it becomes this kind of viral effect where you go, well, more clients, higher value clients, capacity freed in the team, and it's more attractive to work here. So it's going to be easier for us to recruit people. Well, that's a recipe for growth in anyone's book, right? And that's what's interesting about smaller firms can do this more quickly. And so why not go and do it now than wait to see the bigger firm up the road's done it and now we've got to do it. Let's do it when we've got a real competitive advantage from doing it.
Absolutely. It's that positive feedback loop. It's just good things happen to you because good things happen to you, and the more good things happen, they're bounds. Let's go ahead and have our second review question here. Which of the following is a benefit of conducting data-driven audits? Modern methodology employs data analytics and automated tools directly into the engagement. Engage staff, improve skills, attract new digital natives, enhance critical thinking skills and judgment. Client added value, better communication with the client throughout the audit, not just serving the report at the end and collecting a big old check. Insights, more opportunities. What do you think here, Mark?
In my professional career, Steve, whenever all of the above was an option at the bottom of the question, it was pretty difficult to turn it down, I'll be honest. But I think the biggest thing here is for me that focus on the client. I think that we often are nervous about technology because we're worried about how it's going to impact our relationship with the client. We're also very kind of concerned about how is the client going to view what we're doing. Does it look like we're just doing things more efficiently and therefore I'm going to have to give some of the feedback because traditionally I charge based on the number of hours I'm doing this service for. All of this, if you think about it from the client's perspective, why would they not want you to be embracing these kind of techniques, right? What do they look for from you? And I've seen many firms and they're nervous about having that conversation with the client about what do they want. And I say to them, well, I'd rather you went and had the conversation than one of your competitors, because even if you think that they're not interested in a more valuable service or use of data and data analytics. If you're wrong and somebody else has just walked in and said, oh, by the way, we've got this new technology, this new approach, would you like to see more of it? You've lost that client straight away because you didn't volunteer that idea. So I certainly, when I'm looking at an advisor, I want to see that they're using technology and not kind of back in the Stone Age. I want to see that they're interested in what we're trying to achieve, the value that we want from them. So I would really major on that client perspective if I had to only pick one, Steve.
Understood. And I think you can gain all these benefits paired with good company culture and, management genuinely being invested in the growth and success and improvement of firm operations. So we're coming towards the end of our time here. Got about 10 minutes left here, Mark. And when we talk about, again, some of the benefits and, some of the software and solutions and platforms that you kind of provide. And, from my perspective, just, doing the research on this and then speaking with you, you kind of spoke to this just a minute ago. This isn't just an opportunity just to get another application that might make your audit just that much better. I think, again, this is like an investment in the success of the firm and the long-term growth. Personally, for my company, I've never shied away from buying good tools for my staff. I've often used the analogy, like, I can go to Home Depot here and I could go buy a ratchet set for $20 and, wrench on my truck, but why does my mechanic spend $150 on Snap-on or Mac tools, when they're wrenching on their clients? And it's because that tool is how they make their money. That's how they make their livelihood, and from my perspective, this software is very similar, but in the professional services environment, like this is that premium tool that really isn't just going to make that audit that much better. I mean, it's a thing that's going to allow you to turn the page, to add capacity, growth, better insight, a better experience for all parties involved. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely, Steve. And one of the things that's often surprising for firms as well is when they realize potentially how much of the existing technology stack that they're using that they could collapse into a single tool.
Yeah,
it often costs less anyway. So it can be, there's a much bigger prize here, but this is something that is a real rethink on the technology stack. It doesn't need to be complicated. I don't want people to be sat there thinking, well, this sounds just too big a task, so I'll move it down the to-do list. It's very much about trying to line this up as you said there, the culture of the firm, the leadership of the firm, their experience with change previously, their appetite to change. How can we craft something that recognizes where they are and where they want to get to and really works with them as an innovation partner? So we don't just provide the technology. We've got a real team of experts here that have been there and done this before. And we make those people available to help firms implement these techniques. That's thinking about how do we train the teams? How do we get the integrations working? But it's also thinking about, well, how do we communicate to the client about this? How do we explain it to them? And you kind of brought the change management piece. I think change management is such a kind of challenge that firms have experienced. And one of the things that I think is part and parcel of that is services like audit typically are done the same way year after year. And so if you're in a mindset of, well, we roll forward the engagement and we do it exactly like we did last year, and then we'll kind of move on, or Sally, as we hear it called, same as last year.
Same as last year.
That's one of the biggest problems with change management, right? Because our default position, and sometimes even the software we're using, basically says, I'm going to assume you're doing this exactly the same as you did last year, so let's just do it again. And it's kind of going, well, hang on, but if we've done that for the last 10 or 15 years, things have moved on a little bit. So how do we actually kind of start to recognize that we need to bring this in maybe in particular areas? Maybe we need to achieve some quick wins really early to build some of that momentum and buy the right to continue to change. It's all of these things which there is no kind of plug-in technology that helps with the hearts and minds across the firm. Absolutely, people use our technology to win a new client, or their first audit is incredible, and that's kind of spreads, right? That's really good. But it doesn't always work like that, and it's going to be harder sometimes. So I think change management is something that I don't like to overemphasize, because I don't want people to not do something because it sounds too difficult. It's not that difficult. It's trying to really bring it in the way that fits your organization.
Sure. Sure. I remember the first audit I ever did, and it's amazing how much you learn in your first engagement experiences that you use throughout your entire career, but how influential, those first experiences were. And I remember going to the partner or man, whoever it was, and I'm being like, who's this Sally person that I see on all these work papers? Like, I need to go talk to her, that's.
I recently learned,
Yeah.
because I was aware, I was aware of Sally, but I'd never come across, I got explained there was Dilly and and Millie, which was, and the last one was my favorite one. Missed it last year was the abbreviation.
Okay. Yeah.
Missed it last year. So yeah, there's all sorts of these joyous abbreviations, but it just plays to some of the mindset piece that we're playing with here.
Yep. Yep. So what I would want people to leave here with knowing is that with Inflo, I mean, it's a collection of lots of different things that can really help anybody in assurance services with servicing their client needs, from collaboration to the collection of data necessary to manage their work papers, to producing a better report overall. And you guys have a very comprehensive collection of services really to assist the profession, like the webinars that you mentioned that you do, and the knowledge base and the training that's part of adopting this solution. It's not like you just like, here's your software, go have a nice life. It's like you're involved with ensuring that this is successful with the client from start to finish.
Absolutely, and it's a real partnership approach. Even things as crude as our licensing, Steve, are designed around the value that we're delivering. So if we deliver value, then the license grows, and if we don't, it doesn't. And it's that kind of skin in the game approach that we have with this that recognizes that CPA firms are often looking for a partner to help them with this particular challenge. Some of it is just really understanding and education around, well, what is AI and how is it relevant to what I'm doing? And when should I be thinking about implementing that in my work? And it's that kind of mindset that creates that real partnership approach to the way that we work with CPA firms.
Yep, I agree. And there's so much. I mean, the accountant is the go-to, for just about everything. Like, hey, I don't know this. Do you know somebody who does this, or can you do this for me? And in my career, I'm no longer directly in public accounting anymore, but I spent so much time with accountants and around accounting. You really have to be the jack of all trades and have so much comprehensive knowledge, because your client looks at you as like the business, the business guy who just knows about everything. There might be specialists in legal or insurance or whatever, manufacturing, but this is a tool that can really help that accountant, kind of be that business guru that they need for their clients, and really to kind of assist in all aspects of that firm engagement for that audit, the services. Let's go ahead and have our final review question here, and then we'll wrap up. What are the 4 products of Inflo? I'm going to go ahead and let you, Mark, answer this here.
It's a single choice on the poll, so I hope everyone's going to get this right. So yeah, that should cover all possible options on the screen, Steve.
Yes, yeah, that's fine. That's the Zoom only lets us do one. As long as they select one, they get. We know that they're here. But the correct answer is everything. I mean, you guys are, start to finish, A to Z. With respect to whether it be the analytics, the collaboration, the work papers, it could do everything for you.
Yeah, I think we all love a point solution now and again, but if you're building a tech stack that's entirely made out of point solutions, it becomes very challenging.
Yep. Well, folks, that does bring us to the end of our presentation for today. Today we went and took a pretty good look at the Inflo solution for audit, talking about how this product can be used for digital transformation and growth inside your firm. It's not just about creating a new set of problems on a new set of technology, but breaking the chains of the old ways of doing things and providing that growth and digital transformation to really make you that firm of the future. For those who are watching live, your credits will be sent to you automatically in the form of CPE certificate after our webinar, so stay tuned to your inbox. And for those of you who have not joined live, that are maybe watching on YouTube, Facebook, or listening to our podcasts on Apple Podcasts Google Play or wherever you happen to get your content. As a reminder, this is for free credit. You can head over to cpetoday.com and find our course and take a short 5-question quiz and earn a credit for watching or listening. Now, besides our podcast for today, if you've never tried our platform before, use one free podcast to check out, and you can find any podcast class that we're choosing 100% for free. Mark, if people are interested in getting in touch with you and Inflo, what would be the best way of going ahead and doing that?
If you'd like to find out more, please visit our website, inflosoftware.com, inflo without the W, software.com. You'll be able to find a number of resources on the website, but we also make demonstrations, personalized demonstrations available to people on the website. So if you want to understand more about the technology before you speak to somebody at our organization, that's a great way to do it. But do reach out if you want to talk about even, no commitment basis, just talking through where you're currently at as a firm and what other firms are doing in this particular area. Our team are always on hand and always welcome to. So hit the contact us button or book a demo on the website, and maybe mention this webinar as well, so as the team understand what you're where you're coming from and the knowledge you already have. And we'll be happy to support. If you want to continue to follow me personally or interact with me, please find me on LinkedIn. Always happy to message with people or share hopefully some more useful nuggets on social media.
Well, perfect. Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your knowledge, your expertise, and creating what is an excellent solution for audit and assurance professionals. Just want to say thank you also to your team and Cheryl for all of their help in getting this coordinated. And I hope we can do it again soon. So I wish you the best. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.